This is the first edition of the forum. The next edition will be in year 2022, and hopefully physically in the city of Venice. Why we chose Venice for this forum? Because Venice had the longest lasting institutional forum in the world. The term ballot comes from the ballotte that were used in the electoral process of the Doge, the head of the government in Venice. The procedure to elect the Doge was left unchanged from 1268 to 1797, so more than 5 centuries, the longest lasting institutional form in the world. And it gave so much to voting theory, to the electoral process, that we decided that Venice should be the headquarters of the International Forum on Digital Democracy. I have to thank Fondazione Cini and Università Ca' Foscari. Unfortunately, we have not had the luck of being in their absolutely gorgeous premises this year, but we wait for all of you in 2 years' time for the second edition of the forum. I also have to give really many thanks to Reimagine Europa, because we have really partnered in a fantastic way in order to bring this forum to reality. What is going to happen today? After these opening remarks, I will have an interview with former President of the European Commission and former Prime Minister of Italy, President Romano Prodi, and after that there will be some parallel sessions presenting papers from the call of papers to the university, for the call of position papers to the universities that we ran in the past months, and this will be related to participation and the functioning, the internal functioning of political parties, something that is one of the points that is really very important in my mind and will be part of the conversation with President Prodi. Then there will be a deep dive with Gianluca Misurata, who is a strategic policy advisor on digital governance, technology and diplomacy and human-centric artificial intelligence, and a research fellow at the Department of E-Governance and Public Administration of the Danube University. After that, there will be a plenary session with a conversation between Minister Federico D'Inca and Marco Pierani. Marco Pierani is the Director of Public Affairs and Media Relations at the Euroconsumers, so the Federation of Consumers Associations in Europe. And the Minister Federico D'Inca is the Italian Minister for Parliamentary Relations. So he's the person that tries to manage the smooth functioning of the relationship between the government and the parliament. And of course, in this era, a pandemic era, he has a huge work to do. Then we will have an address by Nanjala Nyabola, who is a writer and author of Digital Democracy, Analog Politics, on how the digital era is transforming politics in Kenya. Then we will have a coffee break, a short coffee break, and then again, parallel sessions on information access and integrity, where two more selected papers will be presented. After that, a deep dive on protecting electoral integrity in the digital age. And we know how this topic is very controversial, and given the results and the appeals to the results in the US, and that will be run by Professor Stefan Stedman from the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies, and Secretary General of the Kofi Annan Commission on Election and Democracy in the Digital Age. A second deep dive will be a Digital Democracy Manifesto by Richard Barbrook. He is an author of several influential essays on information society and a winner of the 2008 Marshall McLuhan Prize for Outstanding Book in the field of media ecology. One of his writings, Californian Ideology, written in 1995, has been a seminal paper relating these issues. The very end of the day, we will have, in the afternoon, evening, we will have Professor Jeffrey Sachs, well-known, who has participated today, who's an economist, and he leads the Sustainable Development Solution Network for the UN, and who will give the final remarks of the 2 days, and he will present the results of the most voted paper. So please vote the paper, the best paper. You can vote with the button, I don't know, well, at the top right on your screen. After that, we will have a virtual aperitivo where you will have the chance to interact directly with the authors of the paper. Well, that is pretty much so for the day, and I will go on and talk to and start my conversation with Professor and President Romano Prodi, and see you all in 2022. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and thank you for being here for this second session. I am so grateful, and my great pleasure to introduce to you President Romano Prodi. Everybody knows Romano Prodi. Romano Prodi has been the former Prime Minister of Italy and former President of the European Union. Thank you, President, for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation. I am flattered.
Thank you so much. You have been regarded as being the first Prime Minister of Europe, because during your presidency of the European Union, there was so a devolution of some powers from the member states to the European Union. And during your presidency, there was the Treaty of Nice. And in this Treaty of Nice, France wanted an equal weighting of the votes in the Council, while Germany wanted the votes of the more populous countries to carry more weight. And your Commission proposed a system that was a middle ground that took into account both of the population represented and the number of states. But this was also rejected, and a compromise was reached with a double majority of population and states. This is an example of the highest level of the fact that politics is the art of compromise. Online, many people evoke a constraint in the mandate of politicians, of political representatives. But how is this possible when compromises have to be made? How can accountability of politicians, of political representatives, be compatible with the need of reaching compromises?
Look, I think that politics is really a compromise, but wisdom needs compromise, you know. And when somebody talks about the constraint of mandate, he doesn't know what is politics, you know. Only dictatorships can have the constraint of mandate, because the mandate is by own selves, you know. And look, because politics is compromise, I think that the problem of internet dominating politics is an impossible task, because the network, you know, he sends messages, and there is no room of compensation of all the mandates sent. And so technology is really a problem for democracy. From one side, you have more information, you have more openness, you know, everything. But from the other side, this is not what democracy is, because all the elected people, they must be free to analyze the change of the situation, the necessity and the obligation of the moment. And so if you are linked to the pushing of the net, I think that you are not anymore free. So we must find the compromise between the use of the net as an information instrument, but not an instrument that completely controls the will of the electorates. Not easy compromise, maybe impossible compromise.
Yes, and furthermore, the internet with social networks tend to promote very strong reactions because it's based on the engagement, and the measure of the engagement is how much people interact with the platforms. And so the algorithms tend to favor division over compromise, division over union. And that's related to the business model of advertising that need to keep you engaged for a long time. So I agree, it might be a difficult task, but then if we think that democracy is a value, what should we do about social networks, and how can we make the activity of social network compatible with democracy, and the fact that democracy requires attention and learning and studying, while social networks tend to be more about immediate gratifications and quick reactions. How do you think, is this possible to make them
Forgive me, maybe I am old-style politician, but I do think that democracy is discussion, is interaction, and you need to have a direct contact with people. You need to have, let's say, a choice of the representative people that can be only done with a direct confrontation, with, and so I think that we have to use the net as a proper instrument, let's say, information, but not as a decision-making instrument.
Okay, that is a good point. Thank you. But then, the kind of problems that I described are typical to the Western societies. I mean, if we look to Eastern societies and mainland China, the situation is quite different. You are one of the greatest European person, one of the European person with most knowledge on the on mainland China's values and the Oriental culture, and where they value group more than the individual, and so to a certain extent, individual take a backseat. Some things that are acceptable in those cultures are not acceptable in ours. Take, for example, the Great Firewall, or the usage of artificial intelligence to control the behavior of people, or the fact that privacy is not a valued principle. This leads to the fact that they can be more direct in their decision making based on data, and and looking less to the compromise that we are so tied to in Europe. Is this a comparative disadvantage between Western democracies and this Eastern culture? Are we at a disadvantage when it comes to usage of technology for helping the civil life, the democratic?
Well, I am not an expert of intelligence, of, let's say, artificial intelligence, but my answer is yes, yes, yes. China has a superior strength in this field. I read recently an interesting article written by the former boss of Google that was clearly explaining that the 1.4 billion people standardized with an information absolutely controlled, uh, mm, with the possibility of collecting information without problem of privacy or, let's say, private rights, is an absolutely, uh, let's say, dominant instrument for the future. Uh, I know in China, I say, I think yes. I think yes, it is, because I repeat, if the number of information collected and elaborated are an instrument, you have no limit, no constraints in China. And we see how, let's say, even in the trade sector, how things are going more quickly in China than anywhere in the world. Mm, but how can you translate privacy in the Chinese system? It's totally different, and so we must really have some, let's say, counteracting mentality to that. So we have to shape our sensibility in a different way, you know. But if you take the situation, how things are now, my answer is, please, the Chinese system will dominate
We
this
have,
field. This field.
yeah, we have no chance but to be innovators in the usage of technology in social participation and democratic life as well. Otherwise, they will have a competitive
Yes,
advantage.
yes, yes. If you don't think the playing field, and you base everything on quantity, unconstrained quantity of data, they have unconstrained quantity of data. Punto.
Thank you. Um, uh, and this fact of concentrating data leads me to one fact that uh, when we come to Western values, we always talk about online platforms as platforms, but this embodies the concept of neutrality because a platform does not intervene in the interaction. So in my opinion, we should call them more correctly intermediaries, because these companies intermediate the relationships, be it economic or social information between people and entities. And they gain so much power. What we have seen with the recent elections in the US, and the fact that Twitter started to tag some messages of the president, it was really a new kind of power confronting the present power of the president. In the past, when dominant companies had so significant powers, and Professor Reich also has recently called for this parallel with the robber barons, the antitrust was invented in order to limit the power of these economic giants. Do you think yet antitrust regulation has not been very effective in dealing with these companies becoming so dominant? And do you think that we will need some revamping of antitrust laws in order to be able to deal with this concentration of power?
Look, I studied antitrust for all my life, you know. The situation is totally different, you know. You mentioned the robber barons, but the robber barons were reputed nasty because they increased the price, they, you know, made such a horrible type of competition, quality, and so on. But here, you know, these new dominating people, they are liked by the consumers. They don't they don't make them pay anything, you know. And so I remember a member of the Congress who told me, look, who will have the courage to speak against Apple when everything arrives in your home without spending anything and your children live on that, you know? This is a real problem of changing because the price is paid not by the consumers, but the intermediaries, the people who collect data, and nobody knows about that. Nobody, you know. Second, antitrust. To control the big companies is difficult, and the most used instrument was to break them up, to divide them, ITT and so on and so on and so on. And I repeat, I am not a technical expert, but it's not easy to divide Amazon or to divide Google or this type of companies. And so I do think that the antitrust against them will apply only when there will be a violation of the basic rights. Now it's coming. The problem of privacy are increasing, but if there is not a public consciousness that really basic rights are violated, antitrust against these big dominators is very, very difficult, terribly more difficult. When in the old times, the bigness per se was condemned, or such a bigness per se is so much bigger than it was before, then you should use it, but it's difficult to use it.
Yes, we remember The Curse of Bigness by Brandeis in the US, absolutely. Yet the interference with the political process yet is now, I think, has pushed, a few days ago, there was this 40 US states are suing Facebook and they call for structural separation of the different Facebook businesses. Of course, Facebook might be easier. Other companies will be more difficult. But then this leads me to my final question to you today, and is the fact that at that time we had very inspired politicians, statesmen, really. Now it's more unlikely that we don't see that so many statesmen around, and it seems to me that there is some governance issues inside the political parties. After the political crisis of the 90s in Italy, you founded the Ulivo in Italy, merging 13 political parties, and those were 13 political parties that each of them somehow withdrew from their position, accepting to devolve some control to the larger group. So it was really an incredible operation, and yet I feel that somehow the governance of the political party per se has become an issue, because it's more related to loyalty than to know-how, to skills, to having adequate people. So that promotes having, let me say, lesser quality politician rather than statesmen. So how is it possible, in your opinion, that technology can contribute to the internal life of political parties in order to help them make better choices about the people and putting quality before loyalty?
Look, you have to consider that in the last 4 or 5 years, there was a retreat, a withdrawal of democracy everywhere in the world. People just desired only to delegate authority. Philippines, China, Russia, Turkey, Central Asia, Hungary, Poland, United States also, there was this, Brazil, and we can go on. For the difficulty that you mentioned in your question, take Germany, the most solid traditional party democracy in Europe. You had 2 political parties in the beginning, then 3, then 4, then 5, and 6. Then to have a government in Germany, you need 7 months of mediation. And, this was the reaction of the new media, of people connected. 7 months? We do in 1 second with our new instruments, and in the beginning, it was like this could really improve democracy. And I was really criticized. They were laughing at me because our program of the coalition was as big as 200 pages. But now we understand that tweeting and making so short the program is worse, because then you have more problem, you know. And so we are in the difficult moment of in which we don't know what will prevail. But I tell you that if we don't find a compromise, as you asked me in the beginning, the democracy will be over, huh? Because clearly, and the real problem are the political parties. Or if you have not political parties organized, or an electoral law that give a big premium to the first winner, you know, and so makes everything less democratic, you will never solve the problem. Because starting from the beginning to the end, democracy is compromise, is discussion, and with the new media, the first goal is to avoid discussion, to have a quick decision. And so I think that the retreat of democracy will go on if we don't take different position. Certainly, the Biden victory versus Trump has just sent some sort of different message. But I don't know if this will give time to rethink the strategy of democracy.
For sure, we will have a lot of work to do, and we hope that this International Forum on Digital and Democracy, which is really has been born on the idea of trying to help to bring scholars and people who really study these issues close to the politicians in order to try to help improve political life with technology. We have a monumental task ahead of us. I hope that we see again in 2 years' time in our first physical event in Venice. Thank you, President Professor Prodi, for being with us and for your very inspiring words. Thank you very much.
The physical event will be much more productive.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.